Nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and for those of you who don't know me very well, I am the co-founder of Financing Solutions. And over the last 14 years, Financing Solutions has been the leading provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits throughout the United States. We are the largest provider. We've been doing it a very long time, and we're very good at it. It's a very popular product that has been very life-saving for a lot of nonprofits. And if you're interested in learning more about a line of credit for your organization, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Bryan Partee from Nonprofit Marketplace. And Bryan is a 20-year plus veteran, former CEO of two Royal and Boys and Girls Clubs. Both clubs showed incredible growth from starting off around $225,000 budget to $2.5 million budget for about 80 kids per day to 1,400 kids per day. And when he left the club, he started the Nonprofit Marketplace to use his nonprofit knowledge to help other nonprofits not make the same mistakes. So Bryan, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA Podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I love having the opportunity to help other nonprofits, because one thing I always tell everybody is when you work for Boys and Girls Club, they train you up. They take training really seriously. I mean, from the national level down. And so I was lucky enough, having done it for 20 years, to get a lot of good information, a lot of good how to do stuff. They empowered me quite a bit. So I, like you said in the read up, we all make little dumb mistakes along the way, and I think this might be good and that might be. I've done it, so I can help you out, and so you don't have to go through what I went through and go, oh, why did I do that? That's kind of the idea of the Nonprofit Marketplace.
Yeah, and it's always a good sign when you go into an organization. Their training is great, isn't it? It means that they really know what they're doing.
Well, and here's the other thing, Stephen. They invest in you. You feel important as well, because they want to give their time. They're allocating money to you learning how to do it right. So I think that's important. That for any job, wherever you work, if you want them to invest in you, whether we call them youth development professionals. These are the guys and the girls that were mostly college students who worked with the kids, who did the dodgeball, did the art programs, did the youth development programs. They have programs all the way down for those, and that high turnover, because, people leave all the time. They had training for them too, to do it right. Our organization has these standards. We believe in you enough that we want you to meet these standards, because the end result will be, in our case, more kids will, graduate high school. More kids won't get in trouble with the law. More kids will have something to eat, whatever. And that's why I think it's important. That's always a great sign as a business, when when you're an employee there and they take the time to, we want to teach you. We want you as part of this team, but here's how it has to go to maximize the impact.
Yeah, I mean, 30 years ago when I first started, a little more than that, 40 years ago when I first started my career, there was an acronym. I worked for Xerox to begin with, and they started off, it's called LUDI, Learn, Understand, Teach, and Inspect. And so, it's really important for a nonprofit to understand that, especially executive directors, I mean, at some point you can't be doing everything, and right. You need to kind of be able to train your people. You need to watch over them. And, let's face it, as an executive director, you first have to learn how to build the organization, then you learn how to manage the organization, and then you learn how to lead the organization. So let's kind of move on to today's topic, I really like today's topic. Sometimes I do at least a podcast a week, I think, and this is maybe 250 of them so far, or 300 over the last several years. And so when I look at the topics, there are certain ones that kind of entice me, that I'm like, oh, this is great. And other ones I'm like, okay, this will be okay. But, when I start seeing the word system I get excited because because when you're building a great organization, you want systems,
Right.
and because they can be replicatable. And so today's topic is how your nonprofit should build a grant system. And I really like that. And even before we got on the air, Bryan and I were talking a little bit about a grant that he just applied to. And, one of the advantages certainly that you have is when you apply to grants over and over and over again is you build a system of how to answer certain questions and how to respond with certain data. Is that fair to say, Bryan?
Yeah. You get into a rhythm. Now, keep in mind what I do, because I write for organizations. I'm now freelance, right? Basically as a consultant. So I'm writing when I was with Boys and Girls Club, we did youth development, we did character and leadership. So I had my pillars, I knew them and I knew them very, very well. I'm now doing homelessness. I'm writing grants for homelessness in Philadelphia. We're doing food instability in Ghana. I'm doing youth development in Los Angeles. We're doing a cancer group in Atlanta. So you still got to get those narratives, because a lot of times what you find out is when these organizations, most nonprofits, again, I'm not counting Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, American Cancer Society. Those are gigantic, huge, massive, multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar organizations. We're talking I care about dogs. I want to save animals. Somebody who has a heart for things. You're going in as a well-intentioned person, not knowing anything. Not knowing how to, other than you have a passion for saving dogs or passion for homeless and helping people and feed people, that kind of thing. So you've got a lot of times you get so into it why you did it, and you don't take a step back to look at what's the cause of homelessness in Philadelphia. Why are there people? How can you serve people, better in Philadelphia? What are the numbers? What do the numbers say? Are there other organizations doing this? You're looking at it from your heart when it has to be a combination of your heart and your brain. Because first thing I always tell everybody about when they start a nonprofit is you're a business first. You're a business first. Whether you're going after grants or donors or whatever, how many people are you going to serve if you don't know how to run your business and you go out of business in 6 months? You're serving nobody. A phrase I always use, and it's common when I was in Marshall, Texas is the start of the Bible Belt. And so you get a lot of biblical stuff. And one of the phrases that pastors often use is the road to hell is paved with good intentions, meaning you have this great idea, but it's not going to see to fruition. You're not going to help the people you want. You're not going to be sustainable for multiple years if you don't have things in place, if you don't know your business first. So it's like business first and expand to passion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. So what do you think the key, you've been doing this for a while now and you do it for a living. And when you think of a grant system, what do you think the key ingredients are in a really good grant system process?
Well, first and foremost, grant readiness. You got to be grant ready. There's a lot of things that when you apply for a grant, I equate grant. Well, let me take a step back. I equate grant writing to and applying for grants to kind of being like Shark Tank. If you ever watch the TV show Shark Tank, I've got this idea here, but what does Mark Cuban always ask? Show me your numbers. Mr. Wonderful, always show me your numbers. You got to give them. You got to have proof that you're going to be around for a while and that you're serving people. Because I could tell you this great story how I'm going to build, an animal shelter, and we'll have 5 million dogs. I might have 50 because I didn't know capacity. I didn't know building size. So anyway, the first and foremost is making sure you're grant ready. And grant ready means, and usually it makes it easier for you to apply for grants if you've had at least 2.5 is a little light, but more 3 years worth of data. That's the first thing. So you got to be grant ready, which also means, I've gotten people who don't do their procedures right. There's legal procedures when you're a 501c3. For example, you have to, if you get audited, you have to provide your minutes. So do you have a full board? Are they doing minutes? Do you have a finance report every month? Do you have different factors so that if I were just the president, I could say, oh yeah, I want to build a water slide or something crazy, that kind of thing. Are there those financial controls in place? Those are all part of just getting started. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to do a good thing. I'm going to make sure, we're going to help autistic kids." Who doesn't want to help an autistic kid? Try to mainstream their life. But I don't have any data to show that anything that I'm doing is going to work. So that's the first thing. You got to make sure you're grant ready. One thing that we were, like you were mentioning too, before we got on air that we were talking about, I'm a big believer, and this is ahead of grants, because I always believe, now I'm a grant writer, but I always believe you need a resource development plan first. You've got to figure out where the money's going to come from, whether you're going to charge a fee for the kids that come to your organization, or whether you're going to have a sponsor, or we're going to do a golf tournament or a peer-to-peer campaign, or any of those things. Grants to me are always complimentary. And let me tell you why, Stephen. One is, and this is the first part we were talking about off the air, they're subjective. You could do the matrix, but I just don't like it. We're human. I don't like your name. I don't like the thing. The right. You didn't make sense in this, so I'm just going to not even pay attention to you. So a lot of times there's the subjectivity of it. Grants take a long time. People always think that I'm going to write a grant today, and by Thursday I'm going to get the money. No, you're not. No, I'm applying for grants right now for my customers, where the board of that foundation doesn't even meet till October 1st. So, you've got to understand, it's not a quick process. So what are you going to do for money? So that's the first thing you've got to make sure you have in place. You got to make sure you have your money in place. So you don't want your grants to be completely dependent, your operations dependent on your grant writing, because there could be a situation where things change. In fact, I'm going to give you the example that we talked about just a little while ago. You and I talked about. I wrote a grant for a foundation that we always usually got right around $75,000 to $80,000 every year for about 4 years. Going great. We had great numbers. We justified everything. They were good grants. The following year, we got like $15,000, and I was like, "Oh no, what did we do wrong?" And they're like, "Nothing. We just realized there are a lot more homeless people in Sherman, Texas, than we knew. So we're going to put a lot more of our money towards the homeless."
Isn't that kind of common sometimes that grantors will give you money for 3 years or so, and then they kind of want to spread their money else somewhere else? Isn't that kind of common?
50-50. I'd say more common, yes. To your point, there are more foundations that want to spread the wealth and want to make sure. But there are places now, there's two kinds. Let me tell you about this. There's Walmart grants. Everybody knows Walmart grants, but you're thinking of the Walmart Spark grant. That's when I go into my local Walmart and say, "We're doing this." It's a real easy form, up to $5,000. Usually it's actually around $2,000. And Walmart's job is to spread the wealth. But if you go directly to the Walmart Foundation in Bentonville, Arkansas, they focus on basically two things: youth development, and they do that in the first and third quarter. I think that's what it used to be, first and third quarter, and food instability, second and fourth quarter. That's where you go for the big bucks for them. So that's two different examples to where Walmart local stores want to do, we're going to make sure 1 million people get a $10 grant, $1,000 grant, whatever, you know what I'm saying? A lot more people are served because they want to go, "Yay, we're Walmart and we're helping a lot of people." But then when you really get down to what are the values of Walmart Foundation, kids and hunger. So that's why and then like I said, if you can get one of those Walmart Foundation grants, you got to be invited to those. But, you can get $100,000, $200,000. They're very, very generous with that. So it varies on what you're looking for.
Yeah. When you're, let's get back to systems, because that's really the title of this. Right. When you are, let's say when you're working with somebody who you've been working with them for 2 or 3 years to help them win more grants, what do you have 3 years in that's different than when you first started with them?
Organization. That's one of the biggest systems that you can have. You've got to know, for all my customers, when I do this, and then I have a separate one for myself, do a full calendar. You got to research. Research is, people just think like, "Oh, I'm going to just send." No, there's a lot of work to finding out what they fund, when they fund, what's their average gift amount. You got to find all that out, put it in a calendar, and list everything. What are we going after? What do they fund? Because you'll find some people who'll fund like when we did Boys and Girls Club, they'll find just a girl empowerment program. So I've got to focus on my girls numbers. How many girls do we have at the club? What will this do? Why will these girls be empowered? Some do, both genders, when it's kids, it's a lot of times it's both genders. You got to get all the details first. So the way I do it is when I get a new customer, I have them fill out a sheet. What's your mission? What are your numbers? What are your previous year's numbers? Who do you serve? What areas you serve? Because there's some very specific. They only serve this Smith County and not Jones County, kind of thing. You've got to know everything about them because you also don't want to waste your time. The next thing I do after you have your calendar set out, and I always put reminders in Outlook. I'm a big believer in Outlook. So I put reminders there. So it'll, a week in advance, it'll be like, okay, the Jones Foundation grant is due. So I can just keep it on my mind. I always kind of perpetually work on it. The next thing I do, and this is important because this word is overused, but it's completely accurate, is the word right now for nonprofits is storytelling. Storytelling. What's your story? Why what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Tell me the story of this kid. I mean, what sounds better? I'll give you 2 examples, and these are real life examples. I'm writing a grant for Boys and Girls Club. I mean, I'm not currently, but I did. I'm writing a grant for Boys and Girls Club, and I say, we're helping kids. We make sure that they get something to eat. We do homework after school and all that. That's part A. Here's the true story of what I wrote and when I got funded. There's a kid who came to the club because he was living in a car. His mom knew that she was not doing a good job as a parent, and she tried to overdose. She didn't. She survived, but while he was waiting with her as a 12-year-old in the hospital, she looked at him and said, "Go to the club. They'll know what to do." And we made sure that he got homework help. We made sure he had something to eat because it was very common that this kid, again, we'll keep names out of it, but this kid said, "Hey, Stephen, are you going to eat that? Are you going to finish with it? Even if it's a crust of bread, take it. I'll just, just in case later on I need it," kind of thing. He started believing in himself. In fact, he became our Youth of the Year. Twice he was the state of Texas's runner-up. Unfortunately, he never got the gold. He got the silver twice, but out of 1,000 kids that apply, he was pretty solid. He now has a healthy lifestyle, good relationship. He and his wife are married. They have 2 kids. He's got a job. He went into education, things like that. That's the story. What does Boys and Girls Club do? Well, they do good things for kids. Well, I know that. It's a boys and you can tell by the name. It's what you do, and you tell an actual, here's how we impacted it.
That's what a difference. It's a great example because before I really didn't know about Boys and Girls Club. I would have thought it's a place for kids to go after school to hang out, right? But the way you put it was completely different. And I kind of get it.
Well, and that's one of the other things when you do your storytelling, and I'll use my Boys and Girls Club days as an example. I mean, Boys and Girls Club is a national organization. There are 4,000 Boys and Girls Clubs across the country, right? I'm making this sound like a commercial for Boys and Girls Club, huh? But there's a billion. I mean, we've had Denzel Washington was a club kid. Terry Crews, from America's Got Talent. He's actually getting put into the Hall of Fame. There's the national conferences this week. He's a boy. Jennifer Lopez was. Brad Pitt was. Clinton was. The second Bush. I mean, all these different people were Boys and Girls Club, but you still run into people going, yeah, stuff for kids, right? No. Character and leadership development, education and career, healthy lifestyles, the arts and technology, things that kids, one of the clubs I am writing for one Boys and Girls Club right now. If they didn't go to the club, they wouldn't have access to the internet. And how behind would kids be educationally if this group of kids got access to the internet, but this group of kids didn't? It allows them more academic opportunities and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is when you go after grants, you have to say those things because you can't take for granted. I mean, we're a national organization. I was when I was with them, a national organization with high profile stuff. And people still, you do basketball for kids, right? Well, we do basketball, but we also do food. We do basketball, but we keep our program open till midnight on Thursdays and Fridays because in rural East Texas, there's a problem because there's nothing to do for teens. There's a high teen pregnancy rate. So if they're in the club, hopefully they're not out there doing things. You've got to educate people as well when you write these grants because, and well, again, you just can't take for granted what people are saying. And my whole thing is I always try to talk to people as if they're eighth graders. And I don't mean that in the fact that like they're not smart. They're not as smart as I am. I can't go down into the granular using the acronyms that I know. I mean, if you're writing a grant for food instability or for neurodivergent kids, I can't just go out and go ADHD and TCI kids. What's a TCI kid? What does that mean? You have to explain to some people what you're talking about because you're in the weeds. You're passionate about it, but you still can't explain it to everybody being down in the weeds. You know what I mean? It's something new to you. I mean, I've heard enough about nuclear stuff, nuclear physics. I haven't studied it, but I know about the conductors and how things react. And I have the Homer Simpson overview of how a nuclear reactor can work. But if you're going to try to sell me on nuclear reactor stuff and you start using, we need U-35, not U-36. You know that. You don't ever want U-36. I was like, I don't even know what U is. I mean, I know it's uranium, but you know what I'm saying? You've got to let people know and explain to them. So going back to your, system, part of the system is plan first, second story, third though, explain, because again, people don't always understand what you're talking about. You do. I do. I can use every acronym, but I can use OJP and CTQ and all these different acronyms that we use regularly at Boys and Girls Club. And I say, hey, Stephen, what did you think about our CTQ? You know what I mean? So you've got to get that all in place. The fourth thing, I guess, third and a half thing, I would say is part of your system. Try to submit early. Get somebody to, if you get it done, get somebody to read it. I mean, nowadays our computers are pretty good about checking for grammar and spelling and stuff like that, but make sure you do that. But also figure out the best way to make sure things are in on time. And I mean, cause they're not going to take, if I had a grant due today at 5:00 my time and the internet goes out I'm looking, it pops up on my screen, lightning struck within 3 miles of me. We're in a storm right now. So if I were to turn something in and my power went out and I lost the internet, I'm out. When I just as well could have turned it in yesterday or the day before or the day before. And I'll give you a real life example. This happened and this frustrated the fool out of me. I wrote this grant, huge grant, just under $1 million. I think it was like $850,000. Wrote it. I was really proud of it. It was really good. It took me forever to write. It was, by the way, anybody out there doing governmental grants suck. Unless you get a lot of money, there's a lot of work to them. There's a lot of reporting, check your limitations. Everybody goes, oh, I want $850,000. Not if you have to hire 8 more people and you have to do this and this and this and this, that kind of thing. Anyway, I digress. I got the grant done the day before it was due, put it in, overnighted. No, 2 days before it was due. I'm sorry, 2 days before it was due. I overnighted it. It went to the state of Texas. It was a Texas grant going to the Texas TEA, the Texas Education Agency. Got it done, got it there. Showed it delivered. The grant was due on Friday, whatever. It got there Thursday morning. Everything was good. I just took it for granted. Done. I trust FedEx, whatever. Turns out they're like, I was following up a month later or so. And I was like, how did we do? What does it like? They're like, you didn't apply. I go, yeah, here's my receipt. What's going on? What happened was FedEx delivered it went to the Capitol building because the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, is part of the Capitol building right there. They delivered it to the wrong floor and it just sat there. And it just sat there. And I was like, okay, so your mistake. So can we get it in the rotation? Nope, sorry, you're late. I could have just as well driven it there and handed it to some. Austin from where I lived was 6 hours. Now, would that have wasted?
I guess the moral of the story is part of your system should be to call them the day or the day before or whatever and say, I'm just confirming that you received my.
I mean, even email. They're generally when foundations and when
so they go through emails. Okay.
Yeah, well, they do both. They do either. But I mean, I did actually call them. But yeah, just get in touch with them because they know when a grant's about to close, they know 1,000,001. I mean, they're really good about making sure they have extra people on the phones. And I have this really fast question, and I didn't get this form. Can I still turn it in? Whatever, little things like that. Because a lot of them are online, and you're just doing uploads. But yeah, you can send them an email and say, hey, I submitted this. I should have done this. I submitted this on Wednesday. It's coming FedEx. Could you confirm when you receive it? Or something along those lines. Because I cost my customer, well, actually, I didn't cost my customer. It cost me because I was doing my boys and girls stuff. I cost me potentially $850,000 because, like I said, I was very proud of that grant. I did a lot of research to it. I spent a good 25 hours on it for sure, and then it was wasted. Now I could use it again. I just have to update the data, but that's still frustrating, and it's kind of embarrassing too. When whether you're, in my case, I was looking at my board, but if you're also looking at a customer and going, yeah, I got it there on time. You don't want to just sit there and pass the buck. I did my part. Sorry, they're idiots. No, you're still responsible because that's my job as a grant writer, is to make sure the grant gets written and the grant gets submitted. I'm not promising we're gonna get it, because that's one thing you got to remember whenever you hire a grant writer. You're not paying for success. You're paying for a well-written product that has a chance to be funded. Because again, subjective. You never know how a grant scorer is going to feel.
I would also think too, a part of your system at the end should be measurements. So measurements of how many grants did you apply to, how many did you win, and you should be keeping that statistic so that you see over a period of time, are you getting any better at it?
Yeah,
I would also assume too that the longer that you apply for grants, the better your hit ratio is, because you know what not to apply for.
Yeah, you get some of that. Well, here's the thing you got to remember, and this is, again, goes back to the education of things. Now, not about education about your organization, but education about grants. I'm hitting on the ballpark of close to 40%. Now, I'm not patting myself on the back, but a good grant writer, statistically, according to the Grant Professional Association of America, hits about 28%. So I'm above, but still, if you think about it, if I'm at 40%, that still means 50% of the time I'm failing.
Sure.
So you got to go into this when you're a nonprofit. If you hire a grant writer, or if you hire somebody on your staff to be your grant writer, if that person isn't hitting, they don't hit but 1 out of 10, that's a little low. 2 out of 10, though, for a beginner grant writer, that's not bad. You know what I mean? They've got to understand that. The other thing, when you talk about success rate, though, is you've got to talk about real grants and fake grants. I'll tell you what I mean by that. At the end of the year, foundations are required to give away a certain amount of money, right, to keep their status as being a foundation. And at the end of the year, if they don't give it away, a lot of foundations will try to give away their stuff in the second quarter. First quarter to get organized for the beginning of the year. Second quarter is when they give a good chunk of their stuff away. But if they don't, I do, basically a scattershot application for some of my customers. Obviously they have to be, I'm not going to apply for a food instability grant to a dog shelter, obviously. But people who've done stuff historically have done stuff with food, I'll put something out there quick, just to get it out there. Do I expect to get it? Maybe, maybe not. It's a well-written grant, might or might not fit their terms, but it's the end of the year and they have to give away the money. So I'm just taking a chance that if they didn't, that gets me up there. So you can't say, when I say fake grants, I'm not going into that grant saying, I think we're going to get it. I'm not saying we're not going to get it. I'm just taking a boiler template of what we've done before and sending it off. Here's my historic, what I've been saying about food instability, and I'll send it off to food instability places just for the chance that they didn't do it. So you can't really count those, like I said, in the success rate, because I had one customer say, well, it shows here that you did 100 grants and you got 5, and they're like, that's terrible. And I said, that is terrible, but you got to remember, 50 of those grants went off the last week of December because foundations had to do. So I was just getting them out. I was more impressed that I got 50 grants out in a week. I just hear click. So I'd open like 4 or 5 screens in a row, cut and paste, because we were doing the same thing. Those were kind of cross your fingers and hope, again, throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks. So success has to be measured by, like, I was upset, like I told you about the grant for $850,000, because that was a good grant. That was well-written grant. That was a lot of focus, a lot of good numbers, a lot of good impact, because when you do grants, you always want to show the impact. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're solving this problem. If this problem didn't exist, how much worse would our community be without the grant? So that's what you're trying to show them. And so for me, getting that out there and letting them understand what you're going to accomplish. That's your story, and that's where you're going. But to your point, also, you did bring up the word measurement. Measurements are important because we do live in a world of tangibility. Now, you've got to explain some stuff, because if you're doing a health-related nonprofit, right, and you're doing grants for kids with cancer, like there's adrenal cancer. I'm working with an adrenal cancer. The survival rate of adrenal cancer is 10%. If you get it, odds are you're not going to make it. Odds are, I mean, it's a very hard cancer to beat. Plus, there's not a lot of people in the world, not a lot of doctors, because it's kind of rare, that are actually studying adrenal cancer, right? So if I were to present my numbers of what we're going to do with our program, and we're going to save one person, people are going to be like, one person? No, that's a 10% survival rate. You know what I mean? If I save three people, how is this going to, it's going to help three people. Survival rate is, they should be gone. You know what I mean? So you've got to look at those numbers, because when you do a Boys and Girls Club, going back to my Boys and Girls Club days, I'm serving a bunch of kids. And I can say that, if I have 1,400 kids going to all my locations every day, that sounds so much better than we kept 3 dogs from being, 10 dogs from being euthanized at our animal shelter. Well, overall, how many dogs are getting euthanized? You know what I mean? When I say boys and girls, you say, okay, I'm doing 1,400 kids a day, that sounds really impressive. But if you look at the area, my service area, the total number of kids there, according to the school districts, was something in the neighborhood of like 70,000. So I'm only doing, I don't want to demean what we did, because we did great things. But you see what I'm saying? You've got to look at the context at which those numbers come from.
Well, I think we all know that the measurements, the grants are going to require that. I'm also talking about the idea of tracking your success rates for your grant writing, because we're talking about systems for grants writing here. And the other thing, hearing you talk about this too, I would venture to say is that the nonprofits probably get much better at what they do because of what's required in the grants. So they start saying, "Oh, well, how can we measure the success of our rate with homeless not sleeping on the street anymore? How can we measure the success of somebody who no longer goes back to being homeless?" And maybe if you didn't apply to grants, you would not have applied that measurement in the first place.
Right. It gives you more insight.
These are simple examples, right? But we can get more minute. And I completely agree. The best organizations in the world, and I'm including for-profits in that, they really know their numbers.
Yep. Well, you track your data, you know how to interpret your data. But also, here's the other big thing. They're not afraid of their data. And what I mean by that is, I wrote a grant for an organization that had a deficit. And everybody's like, oh, well, obviously you don't know how to run your business. And I argued in that point that it was circumstantial. And let me explain how and what we did. And we committed more money to paying the staff better and a few things like that. So the long-term effect, yes, this year we were down by $30,000. But the long run, the projections that they have are going to be better for us. And I argued a deficit on why you should fund us when we had a deficit time. And we got funded, actually. Because most of the time you think, oh, if we have a debt, we're not going to apply. We're negative $30,000.
They might have just went back to and looked at the years prior and saw that it was a 1-year thing. So
sure, but still, people hide from that. They try to say, when you're talking about racial equity, and you're like, well, we serve 1% Black kids, and we serve 3% Latino kids. Well, what's the population of your area? In our population of the whole area is 95% white. Well, then that explains it. You probably do. Yeah. Are your numbers for Latino and Black low? Yeah, a little bit. But like,
I would have been my guess too.
Yeah. No. When you say 1%, you're going, oh my gosh, that's terrible. No, not because in our area, there aren't a lot of Black people that live, or in our area, there aren't a lot of Spanish speaking, or, whatever. So you gotta, but that's on you as the organization, as a nonprofit. You've got to be the one that can explain that to people, because I know that, if I go North Dallas, we're going to have more white kids. If I do stuff in South Dallas, we're going to have more black kids. Great. You got to explain that to them, because if I just said to you, hey, Stephen, what do you think about this? And because in North Texas, we're serving, 100 black kids, and in South Dallas, we're serving 100 white kids. You're like, what? Why are your numbers? No. Let me explain. You know what I mean? You've got to be able to present where you are and what you live and what you have in your area. That's super important of being able to juggle that, for sure.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we kind of run out of time. It's been a very interesting discussion.
That was quick. That was a quick 35 minutes.
It was. I'd like to thank so very much Bryan Partee from Nonprofit Marketplace for coming on today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend, and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And if you like today's podcast, also give us a 5-star review. It helps get the word out. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your organization, please visit us at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And Bryan, if anyone wants to go and reach out to you and get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
Best way, I'm on the socials as Bryan Partee, but also as Nonprofit Marketplace, as well as nonprofitmarketplace.org. And I can help you with, we talked about grants, but my thing is I'm a nonprofit consultant. So I'm setting up for people board development. I'm setting resource development plans. We're doing peer-to-peer campaigns, other ways to bring in money as well, so your nonprofit will thrive.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on.
Anytime. I loved it.
Yeah, and I always end the podcast the same way. I usually want to just remind the executive directors, you guys are so passionate about trying to really solve world problems, local problems, all types of problems. And we really need you to do that. I know Bryan and I are trying to do our own thing in our own way. But you guys are out there every day. And I just want to remind you all that you're no good to your family, your friends, your employees, and your cause if you burn out. Yeah. And it's a very big part of this industry. So you need to think about yourself first every single day. What do I need to do today to keep myself sane? Like for me, I need to exercise every day. That's if I get an hour and a half in of exercising every day, that keeps me, and it's worked for me for a very long period of time. Then I can do the rest of the day to do the other things that I need to do. But that works for me. So whether it's exercise for you or praying or meditating or taking a walk or going out with a friend for coffee, whatever it is, make sure you're taking really good care of yourself. Other than that, I want to thank you for listening to the Nonprofit MBA Podcast, and have a fantastic day.